Alright, so welcome back. Today, all we're going to do is we're going to get started doing some basic combat stuff. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to set up a sort of shooting system so you can shoot your enemies can shoot back at you. Now, where we left off last time, we should see that it'll run a game, and then your player will just be able to move around, but not really take any damage or deal any damage, right? So it just walks around as normal, cool. But it doesn't really do anything right now. So we want to make it so when you press a button, obviously it wants to shoot a bullet. So let's get started with that. It's pretty simple. All we got to do to get started is we got to make a new sprite for your bullet. So I already have an SPR damage here. I'm going to keep it as called SPR damage, but I'm just going to edit the sprite. We want to make it probably 8x8 is a good size. So hit OK there. Zoom in, fill it with black or whatever color you want your bullets to be. I'm just going to use a gray square for now. Hit center, hit OK. Make an object by clicking this sphere up here. Call it object bullet because that's what we're going to make it. SPR damage. And for now, we're not going to put any code in it. We're going to go straight into our get input here. And we want to first be able to check whether or not we even want to shoot a bullet, right? So we want to make a variable to check if we're pressing an attack key. So in this case, I want my key to be space. So I'm going to set key attack equals keyboard check press VK space. Now, of course, let's say I want to add a second one. So like, let's say you want to use your mouse. It's pretty simple to check if you're pressing your mouse key. So all you got to do is mouse, check, button pressed, MB, left. And that way, if you're pressing your left mouse button, it'll set it to that. But I'm just going to set it to be our spacebar for now. So cool. We have that in our get input. Everything is good. So now open our object player. We can go inside the step event. And we're just going to add one quick check at the very top here before anything even happens. And that's, we're going to use an if statement. And we want to check if we're pressing the attack key. So I'm going to pause right now. If you guys can figure it out, try to figure it out. So just pause the video here. All right. If you figure it out, that's great. If you can't figure it out, it's just as easy as this. Input.key_attack. Essentially what we're checking is if we're pressing the attack key, we want to create a bullet, obviously. So let's do that first. Instance_create x, y, object bullet. So just before you run the game, just remember to hit OK on your object bullet so it sets the name to obj_bullet. That way your code can actually recognize it. Otherwise there's going to be a bug. So hit run. And you can see everything moves normally, everything works just as expected, but then when we press space, you can see this little bullet pops up right where our player is standing. Now of course there's one issue with this. The bullet appears, but it's not actually moving. So let's get that bullet to move now. So we're going to our object bullet, and we're going to add a couple of pieces of code here. We're going to first add a create event to set all of our initial variables. So that includes our direction equals 0 for now. We're going to set our fly speed, which is the speed the bullet flies at, to let's say 15. We want it to be pretty fast. HSP equals 0, VSP equals 0, and that's about it. We can do all of the code in a step event now. So let's open our step event. So in our object step event, all we have to do first is set our horizontal and vertical speeds. So HSP equals length dir x, and then our fly speed and our direction. And then VSP equals length dir y, fly speed, direction. So what these two pieces of code do are, it takes our HSP variable, our horizontal speed, and then it uses this function in GameMaker called length dir, and then it checks the x coordinate. So it's pretty much it's like saying, okay, we're gonna go in this direction at a certain distance. If we're traveling horizontally, what is that distance, right? So it's like, let's say the bullet's traveling diagonally at this position. Length or s, all this is calculating is the horizontal distance. So it'll move the x that much. So now all we have to do is add x plus equals hsp, y plus equals vsp. And then the final piece to add here is if place meeting x, y, object, wall, instance destroy. So now what should happen is we can shoot a bullet, it'll travel in our dir, which we have set as 0 right now, and then once it hits a wall, it should destroy itself. So let's see that in action. Alright, so we run our game here, we can see we have our player. If we hit the spacebar, it shoots a bullet. Now, one issue with this is it's only shooting horizontally. So let's say you're doing a platformer and you want the player to be able to shoot only in one direction, right? Like if you're doing the side scroller and it was only moving to the right at all times, then you could have it so it only has to shoot, you know, in this direction. But because generally you want it to be able to shoot in all directions, we're going to add a couple of pieces of code to make it so it'll shoot the direction the player is facing. What we're going to do right now is we're going to go back into our player's step event here. So we open our object player, we go to the step and open the executed piece of code. And in here what we can do is we have this instance create, right? We're making the bullet. But what we can do is we can set a temporary box, a temporary variable, call it the bullet, and set it equal to this bullet that we just created. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to make a bullet at our player, we're going to put it in this box, and change some of the variables in the bullet directly in this code here. So we can go bullet.dir equals image angle. What this does is because our code is setting the angle of the sprite to be the angle that the player is moving, the direction of the bullet will also go the exact direction the player is facing. So that's always helpful. Now, this is only for if you're doing a top-down game. If you're doing a platformer game, it's much simpler. We can go bullet.hsp equals sine hsp times hsp, or hsp times bullet dot fly speed. One correction we have to do for the platformer code, we want to change the image x scale times bullet dot fly speed. So I won't be able to actually showcase this to you right now because I don't have the platformer object, but just trust me, it'll work. Cool, so now that we have a bullet that's actually firing, let's make it so the bullet itself does damage to the enemy. So right now, everything's okay with our player. Let's open our object enemy. Now you can see in our code right now, I already have a couple of stuff set up here, and it's just the basic health stuff that we set up last time. So you want to go into the create event of the enemy, you want to open it up, and if you don't already have a piece of code in there, go to your control tab, drag in a line of code, and write these two lines right here. Set your HP to equal to 10 and set your max HP equal to HP, just like we have in the player. Then hit the green check mark, go to our step event, or add a new step event if you don't have one. Go into the code and add this piece of code here. Now you can see for enemy objects, it's a little bit different, right? For the enemy object, we want the enemy to actually die once the HP is less than 0, and we want the object to be removed from the game. Because it's not the player, so there's no respawning, this object can just be gone. It can be gone forever. So we just have that object be destroyed. Now above it, let's actually check now to see if it's hitting the bullet. So what we got to do first is if instance exists object bullet. So if the bullet does exist, we want to type var bullet equals instance nearest xy object bullet, and then we want to check if place meeting xy bullet. We want to take some damage, and then we want the bullet itself to be destroyed. So it'll be HP for now minus minus, and then with bullet Instance destroy. So now let's run the code here. And what we should see happen is we can fire 10 bullets off towards the enemy here, and then it should die. But the bullets shouldn't be able to travel through it. So we'll face the enemy here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see the bullets aren't traveling through it because it hits them and then it dies. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's taken all the damage and it's died now. So that's pretty good. Our enemy works, it can take damage. Our player works, it can shoot bullets. So one last thing before we finish off is we want to actually be able to see the amount of damage or the amount of health both your player and your enemy have. So for your object enemy, we're going to hit green check mark here. We're going to add a new event. It's going to be the draw event because we're drawing something on top of the sprite. And we want to draw the health. So let's do a draw. Drag in a line of code. And we're going to add 2 lines of code here. First one is draw text x y minus 16 string HP. And then we want to do draw self. The reason we want to have draw self here is because if you don't put a draw self, it'll just draw the text and then won't draw the actual enemy object, so you have an invisible enemy. So let's run the game now. And there you have it. You can see, if we go over to the enemy object, we have 10 health above the enemy here. If we shoot it, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One last bullet and it's dead. Perfect. So now we have basic health setup and we have a basic combat system to get your player to damage the enemy. Next time, we're going to get the enemy to actually shoot back at the player, and then we'll be moving your player between multiple levels.